Women have always had clear expectations of what they should look like and how they should act. As early as a century ago, American trends included a preference for slimmer bodies. In the early 19th century, women began regularly weighing themselves, and throughout the following decades, an American tradition developed of weight watching and reduction in order to be healthy and more appealing. This escalated during the 1920s when more revealing clothing was in style. But this trend reversed during the Great Depression when there was an overall lack of body image consciousness because the nation was focused on basic needs and often simply surviving. Then came the post-war prosperity of the 1950s and the establishment of the nuclear family. This American model emphasized women's roles as strictly domestic. In 1960, two-thirds of all white women were homemakers, and men could easily afford to support their families. The women's version of the American dream became getting married by 21, quitting work, and having around 4 children. As many women realized this lifestyle was not fulfilling and that they had other goals than to be a homemaker, a new form of feminism was born. Women wanted to express themselves freely rather than being trapped in societal expectations. This sentiment, along with the debut of birth control, encouraged women to focus on what they wanted, thus beginning the sexual revolution. Women no longer had to comply with sexual double standards because they finally had control over their fertility. In the 1970s, more and more women delayed marriage and motherhood, and there was a surge in women's professional education. Economic trouble in 1973 caused women to flood into the paid labor force and forever broke the nuclear family model. By 1975, fewer than half of all women with children worked at home. As American women had more opportunities and more control of their future, they could focus on themselves and their own ambitions. As ability for expression increased, so did women's desire to improve themselves and become something better than they were. This caused body image to become central to women's American culture in the 1970s and 80s. During the 1960s, women's beauty standards included the boyish look popularized by the model Twentieth. During the 70s and 80s, women's beauty standards shifted from this boyish look to the athletic figure. For the first time in American history, women were encouraged to be strong and have muscles, to take care of themselves, and to be confident. Suddenly, there were numerous ways for self-improvement, including the famous workout DVDs, the opening of gyms, thousands of diet and low-fat foods, tanning beds, and other extreme methods that became more popular than ever before, such as eating disorders and cosmetic plastic surgery. The woman who is fit and constantly improving herself became a symbol of health and virtue. Feminist ideology capitalized on physical fitness as a way to socially empower women.
When I was in high school, it was beauty standards were more along the lines of a Barbie figure. Girls were termed either like a carpenter's dream, they were flat as a board, or a brick house, which was 36, 24, 36. The Commodores wrote a song about it even. So it was more important to have some curves then, but not too many curves. You know, you didn't want to be overweight.
In the year 1960, only 24% of Americans claimed to exercise regularly, and the few health clubs that existed were only available to men. As self-improvement and physical fitness became popular, there was also a spike in the number of overweight and obese Americans. Women needed a way to exercise. In the 1950s, Jack LaLanne was the first person to popularize guided exercise on television.
1, 2, 3. All right, the other side. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out and in and out and in and 1 and 2, 3, 4.
Exercise really took off in 1982 with the release of Jane Fonda's The Original Workout. This video had very easy dance-like moves designed with the intention of getting viewers to move more than they normally would. It had a diverse crew of fitness models that sported classic 80s styles. Many other workout VHS tapes were released, including Buns of Steel and Pumping Iron 2, The Woman.
So I think to sum up the 80s, you could say that fitness became fashionable. And I think there's several things that were factors in this. The first is that we all had VCRs in our homes, and exercise videos became wildly popular, and women wanted to look like these people in these videos. Jane Fonda, Kathy Smith, Denise Austin with their tiny little bodies and their big hair. We all wanted to look like them, and we wanted to do what they were doing to look like that. I also think that the gym became much more friendly and accessible to women. It was a social place to go, and people would get dressed up in these almost costumes of colorful leotards, tights, leg warmers, and I think it was Jane Fonda that said if you look at the pictures, the leotards are very high cut on the sides, and she said that if you do that, it makes your legs look longer and leaner. So if you look, everybody's got those really high cut leotards that are kind of funny. The exercises in the gym and on the videos were very dancey aerobic classes. And then later there was an addition of target exercises like videos, buns of steel, abs only workouts, that kind of thing.
People of all ages began exercising more in the 80s. Upscale people in upper income brackets opted for jogging and health clubs, and Time magazine said, most of the 76 million baby boomers are finished with the drug culture and alternative therapies. Instead, many of them have seized on fitness. Older Americans jog in an attempt not to be pushed aside by an army of fresh, unlined faces running in their wake. By 1987, 69% of Americans said they exercised regularly, up 45% in 30 years. The majority of these exercisers were women. Women's sports also expanded during this time. Between the 70s and 80s, the number of women who participated in sports grew by 3 million. The rise of visual culture, sex clubs, fitness centers, and advertising made a woman's ability to care for her body define her personal attractiveness. While exercise and focus on self-needs did empower women, it also caused a commitment to externally created and imposed standards of sexual attractiveness and beauty. These standards were represented by the new and hugely influential supermodels. A few glamorous yet healthy women gained power and recognition and replaced traditional Hollywood celebrities during the 80s. Entire advertisement campaigns were based around them, and they became the women's ideal goal: powerful, smart, with a perfect fit body. Dieting also took off during the 70s and 80s as another means for self-improvement. It had been normal for women to attempt to lose weight so they could meet societal expectations throughout the 20th century. In 1977, the federal government published dietary goals for the United States, a report that supported a low-fat diet in order to prevent heart disease and obesity. It caused low-fat dieting to enter mainstream American culture. Food industries realized this could be a profit-making opportunity, and fat was replaced with sugar and processed foods. In 1988, the American Heart Association released a Heart Healthy Seal of Approval, suggesting processed foods with low fat were better than fresh foods and foods low in sugar, which did not have the seal. The American public's new goals of being fit, thin, and healthy were also capitalized on by the launch of thousands of diet drinks, pills, and plans that were in every women's magazine and popular health media. Dexatrim was one well-known diet pill throughout the 70s and 80s that claimed to curb hunger and prevent binge eating. A Yale study in 2000 discovered a link between the drug and strokes in females.
In the afternoon or evening, and I lost weight.
Extra strength Dexatrim. No appetite control capsule works harder to help you lose weight.
There were all kinds of fad diets. in the 80s, all fruit, all carbs, the cabbage diet. Slim Fast was a really big thing in the 80s. There was an advertisement by Special K that asked if you could pinch an inch, and if you could pinch more than an inch anywhere on your body, you basically needed to go on a diet. Diet pills became very popular, I think, as people became more and more desperate to look like these people.
Women also lost extreme amounts of weight by heavily disordering their eating, and the number of diagnosed cases of anorexia and bulimia soared in the 70s and 80s, after cases disappeared in the earlier part of the century. These cases were primarily young, affluent women who felt pressure to remain thin but could not naturally keep up with the trend. The disease became widely known after the death of Karen Carpenter in 1983. The singer had some of the biggest hits of the 70s and died of full cardiac arrest at 108 pounds after recently being down to 90 pounds. As women had more control over their lives and their futures, it occasionally led to perfectionism and attaining goals by whatever means necessary. Though the number of documented eating disorders increased rapidly in this era, it still continues to rise in modern day. Tanning was another symbol of beauty during the 70s and 80s, though it began in the 1930s when Coco Chanel returned from a vacation with bronze skin. In the 50s, women used silver metallic UV reflectors. In the 60s, butters and oils became the tanning lotion of choice as surfer culture was in style. And in the 70s, the first tan-through bathing suit was introduced. During the 80s, Americans were getting used to being able to change how they looked and felt quickly with dieting and exercise plans, and this was no different for tanning. The tanning bed was introduced as a commercial service in the late 70s, as women wished to have a year-round tan. This was also before tanning beds were linked with cancer, so they were very appealing. Even in the 1970s, Barbie dolls sported bronze skin, as well as eyes that faced forward rather than off to the left as they had in the 60s, emphasizing women's new confidence.
Malibu Barbie has her own beach towel and sunglasses and Malibu friends, all with that suntan skin that makes them look great wherever they go, in any of their groovy new fashions.
People have gained weight a lot over the years, and so there's been a lot of focus on we're coming from several decades of you should be fit and slender, and then junk food and all of that stuff, watching TV, just being very sedentary, kids playing video games, like people are gaining weight, so the trends are upwards. At the same time, there is this strong message in the media about how we should look. We should be slender, we should be thin, we should be fit, or so there's a huge discrepancy between the reality versus expectations and pressures in the media. So I think that's why a lot of people have a lot of dissatisfaction.
Since the 80s, harmful diet drugs and plans have declined in use. There are treatment centers for eating disorders and obesity, tanning beds are now used in moderation, and plastic surgery has become less risky, although the ideal body we see in the media has become slimmer and more unrealistic. The growing divide between the beautiful women all girls see many times a day in media and on social media is not a realistic goal. Eating disorders occur at a higher rate than ever before because women are placed under such strict external standards. But there is growing resistance against this. Many advertisers are starting to use models that represent all women instead of traditional supermodel look. Instead of using freedom of expression to encourage self-improvement, there is a greater push to encourage self-acceptance.